So great. So welcome back. Come on in and have a seat and we'll get started. This is one of my favorite teachable moments with adults as well. Expectations, right? Like come back in, okay, we're gonna start at 4, right? Or whatever it is, whatever the clock was, right? 4 or 5. We come in and then we still talk over here, we get going over here, and then the teacher has to give a, call and response or whatever it looks like. And it's so funny when, in education, because I have some retired teachers and teachers in here, and you all work with kids every day in the classroom, right? As adults, we have the hardest time coming back. Man, little teachable moment though, if you do have, but admin's worse than the teachers, right? If a little tip since we're on it, if you do have a kid that's really hard with transitioning, a lot of times what happens with kiddos when there's a transition, they don't know when the stop is, right? Or they think when they hear stop, it means I'm not going to be able to do this anymore, and this is being taken from me, right? So we have to remember that if you do have one of those higher flyers that has transitioning troubles, we're going to talk about pre-correction, which just means trying to get out in front of the correction, right? Pre-correction, because we're going to try to get in front of it. And a lot of times I'll use pause instead of stop, because I will say, Ruth, I hope you don't mind me always using that as an example. You're right in my purview, right? And I heard you say, I think we got something going on with how we were doing things before. It would be, Ruth, in 2 minutes you're going to pause what you're doing, and if they have a book or an item or whatever, you actually have to put a sticky or tell them where to pause, because they'll keep going and then I'm past the pages and what do you mean? We have to really help them with transition. And then what's best for the whole class then is 2 minutes till transition, right? Because I'm telling them what? We're going to get ready to change what we're doing, and all of you are going to stop, right, and get ready to change. But some of our friends need a little more time and to understand that they can come back to that activity. Because I can say, Ruth, you're going to pause, here's the page, and then they go, no, I don't want that page. And then I pick between the two and go, which one, this one or this one? And Ruth goes, that one. Awesome, Ruth, that page is the one you can pause at. Go ahead, right? So go ahead, let's get going. So here is the number one key. We talked about, behavior, why it can escalate, there's differences, things going on. One of the things I want to make sure we all know in here is that high expectations are important. Research and evidence will actually say that we need rules. We need to hold and be accountable for what those look like. However, they can't be secret. We need to teach kids what's going to happen or what is happening. The number one key, though, is that effective discipline systems are not known by what to do when misbehavior happens. It's about what to do to help it from occurring. Number one, crisis management runs that way, right? In life, they run programs this way. So it's not just for behavior, it's for all things. It's about prevention. We want to prevent fires from happening, right? We learn about fire, etc., etc. Behavior is the same way. So we're going to talk a bit about prevention before we get into after the behavior. So go ahead. So I talked a little bit about prevention. Well, here's how to help let it soak in a little bit more. Let's think about driving as prevention, okay? Did we just get given our license and be expected to drive? What do we have to learn to do? Where do we go to do that? School. And what they have us do? Practice. I have a 15-year-old. Oh, listen, yes, right? All the things that we do before. What do our roads look like? Look at the picture. Do I know that I should do 25 on that road because it's in front of a school? Because it told me in the book. It told me in the class. Should I know better? Then why do we have signs all over the place that tell us what speed limit to do as adults or as people who get and pass? Reminder. It's a reminder. The key piece like to tell people and equate this to is a lot like behavior. We go, yeah, but they should know better. And I go, well, so should we, right? 25 stop signs, four-way stop, right? Yield, slow down, it's telling me all the things, right? Along the way and along roads. So when you look at this picture, here's a unique one. I don't know if you can see it, but right behind the 25 speed limit, there's another thing that scans how fast you're going. Well, why did I need that? Huh? That's another what? It's another reminder. I had to have another, oh, so I'm already supposed to know. I got the sign that tells me. Now I have another one that says, hey Sarah, you didn't slow down. So we need to think of behavior a lot like that. Is that just because I told you once, or expect you to know, or I taught you at some point, sometimes we have to do this a lot with kids, right? Is remind them. And we'll get into a little bit also with it's just a good, connection for folks with behavior and then these things is that what happens if I'm going too fast? Who's waiting for me? Yeah, and based on the situation, I can get a ticket or they go, don't do it again, Sarah, right? I mean, there's all these systems set up. Let's say I have past record and he looks it up and he goes, guess where you're going, Sarah? Another reminder, I'm going back to school to what?
Oh, I think they were the loose guy.
Read. I could go to jail or back to school to learn again, right? So there's just pieces that we need to think of as really about prevention, okay? And the cop, when they're sitting on the side of the road and they don't come out to get you, we call that proximity, okay? Because what happens when a cop pulls behind you? What do?
Slow down.
Right? Well, with kiddos, proximity and actually having adults, active supervision is a strategy. The more adults there are, if I kind of wander over to your table, kids kind of, ooh, I better be doing what's, the kids that can will. I want you to keep remembering that. The kids that can will, okay? All kids can, just maybe not yet. Okay, because I want you all to think about that, okay? Go ahead. So here's the thing. Your approach changes everything, okay? Go ahead. And what I mean by that is that we have to understand that how we approach every single situation, the only thing we have control over is who? Yeah, 100% ourselves, okay? Go ahead and change the slide. So think about a time when you felt distressed, right? Or challenged by someone's behavior, okay? Think about that, okay? Now, I'm gonna give you an example. I had a situation with my kid, and it was pretty challenging and distressing. And she looked at me and she said, Mom, calm down. What do you think I did? Do you think that calms me down? No, right? The thing is that often that's our what? It's our go-to to try to help, but that's not helping me, right? That's not helping me. So go ahead. What we're going to talk about is that our response matters. So these are strategies that I'm going to be talking about, even though sometimes they don't feel like them. These are going to be some of the #1 strategies you actually have, is your response matters in any situation with somebody, whether it's a spouse or whoever or kids. That our strategies for managing conflict were actually learned when we were little, okay? When we were little. So we're kind of hardwired to go back to how we learned. And it's really hard for me. I work in education settings, right? How I was little and running the streets and doing what I did was I'm a fighter, okay? So if there's conflict, I'm in it, right? Like I want to be, that's my natural biological wiring. That's how I learned, okay? So it took a long time for me to learn to pause, okay? As a matter of fact, I have a tattoo right here that says, be still, Okay, I'm the Lord your God, I will fight for you. You only need to be still. Because I need that visual reminder that says, Sarah. Okay, but I have to pause. I have to stop and think. Okay, I've got to stop and think about what my response is. So knowing that is critical. How are you? Right? Are you an escape? Are you somebody, I don't want to deal with that situation? Because we have people who flight, right? Who would rather ignore situations. So we really need to understand how we're wired and how we work functionally, because the outcome of the situation depends on it, who we are, right? And what that looks like. Go ahead. So Q-tip is something in like crisis prevention, intervention, or things that we say. It's called quit taking it personally. So what happens a lot of times with You Matter and the strategies when we're working with kiddos is that we do have to remain calm. That's the number one, because it can get our goat. A kid flopping around or not being a part of the best lesson I am ever doing and teaching about, whatever it is, insert here. And they're over in the corner not engaged and rolling around on the floor. Dang it, right? We can't take it personally, okay? We have to take some deep breaths and either have somebody else come alongside that kid and get them over, right? Or be prepared to pause. But I always say if they're quiet and rolling around, the stop point for masses of classes is if they're disrupting the learning I'm giving or the learning of each other. So loud screaming would be one of those that would disrupt the learning of others. Rolling around on the floor in a corner, kind of being quiet but not sitting up yet, we'll get there. I'll get there, but I gotta get the rest of the class on what? Track, doing what they can, then I will come over to my friend, okay? So go ahead. So don't take the bait is what we say. Don't take the bait, okay? Man, I do great at schools, but guess where I suck? At home. Man, my kids, my husband, I take the bait because I go where? To what I remember, how I've always learned, and I have to fight it to do better. But you can learn a new response. It's kind of like when I worked in Seattle with high-risk kids, and I was all about respect. You need to respect me, I've learned from when I first started till now, but it was all about respect, and you need to respect me to be here, this kind of stuff. And now I'm like, wow, all the things I know, it's like, that's not gonna win them over to help. Because this is about behavior. If I want you to do something, do you think me challenging your behavior is gonna get you to do something? No, okay? Know this, that in our response, okay, body language, how you say it, word choice, okay? So there's like a diagram up there that says nonverbal, words, and how you say it. So which is the largest piece in that pie? Nonverbal. When there is an escalation or something is going on, your number one strategy is to what?
Remain calm.
Nonverbal, remain calm. Because to that other escalated person or whatever's going on, that's 55%. What do we tend to do? What do we tend to do when there's someone? What?
Verbalize.
Heck yeah! Come on, you can sit up. What's going on? What's going on? What's wrong? Blah, 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 blah. We sound like Charlie Brown's teacher or mom or whoever. Yeah. We go right to all these words. And especially when we think a kiddo or somebody is dysregulated, which means their learning brain is way further than even being able to function, because they're in the what? When kids they're in the safe brain, right? Like what's going on, something was my trigger. And we do a lot of talking, nobody's hearing anything. Think about a time where you felt unsafe or you were in a situation that was threatening. You can't even comprehend. And sometimes that's what their little brains do, right? And this is everybody. 38% is how you say it. How you say it. So even with that, if we don't let it get our goat, how we say it, we have to say it with what? Sound like we're calm, kind voice, right? How are you, hey, I'm here So this is really important to see the diagram. Go ahead. So body language matters. So when I say nonverbal, right? When we think about nonverbal, it matters what our body looks like because we can also be very threatening. I have to watch myself because this is a cultural response. I talk with my hands a lot, and I have to know, like when I go into some settings with some classrooms, I have to literally fight my own what I'm doing because this can be threatening to some kids because I look like I'm going to do what? Hit them. Okay? So it's really important to know your setting and know that some stuff we do can trigger. Go ahead. So 80 to 90% of our communication is what? Nonverbal. Man, we gotta just be still, right? Deep breath and process. There's a kid screaming, what am I gonna do? Right? Because the slower we are to react, the more likely we are to have think time. And they actually say you should do 60 to 90 seconds. Okay? 60 to 90 seconds for yourself to be able to rationally get to how do I address this correctly?
That's a long time when a kid is screaming.
Yeah, it is, yep. But what I want to be sure you know is that you can still be by them, you can be sitting with them. If you have the right response, you can move. If you have where you have to think like, oh my gosh, and all you're gonna do is go in and go, Ruth, why are you screaming, da da da, that's when I want you to have the 60 to 90 seconds, right? If you're already used to working with kids and have a calm demeanor and can approach that way, absolutely come in and do what you can. But behavior is communication, right? So when there's something going on, the biggest thing is we've got to listen because they're wanting to be what? Heard. We expect kids to use words and say, you know, I'm really struggling with what just happened there and it triggered me and now I have this flood of anguish and shame and I don't know how to ask you for help because I want to remove from this situation and go be with X, Y, Z, ABC. Instead, I do what? I scream at the top of my lungs, right? And we do it too, we just do it differently. Oh my gosh, I've been where I didn't want to touch the laundry anymore and I flopped on the couch and just did what? Nothing, okay? I went somewhere, it's called, right? Removed myself. So go ahead. So body language matters as well. I'm gonna go through these pretty quickly so I can get to the next things, is that how we approach each other matters as well. Body language matters. We don't want to be front to front, we like to be side, right? Or sit sideways. Lower with kiddos because me being taller than kiddos does what? It feels threatening. Yes, feels very threatening. So getting down on our knees and being to the side, not face to face, our approach matters. Go ahead. Here's something also that's very important when I talk about the comfort zone and the nonverbals. This is a part of nonverbal. Is that there's actually what's called a comfort zone for us. And there's an amount of distance in feet of, hey, we know each other, we're intimate, to casual, to social, to public, okay? And what's important is that you see it gets 5 times the normal physical space if we're what? Threatened or feel threatened. But what do we do naturally when there's a kid in crisis? What do? I want to come in and fix it. So my approach is to be there quickly. I come into that zone with them. So it's really important for us to also know to come close is okay, but it doesn't mean I have to go in and touch, because touch can be a trigger, right? But if I'm present with you, right, side to side and there, and then in a calm voice say, I'm here to listen to you. How can I help? I want to help you. Let's get up and go for a walk, or I'm always going to tell you with a kid in crisis, give them 2 choices. It's always the choices you want, but sometimes if you just go, let's get up and go for a walk, guess what they do? No, I don't want to go for a walk, and I'm going to kick and scream. You know, a lot of times kids feel like they don't have the power, and so if we give them choice of the things I already know I want them to do, they're more likely to do something because we're giving them power back, okay? If any of you have kids, it's like I used to wonder about the people who had kids that had red boots on and another shoe on and a dress, but they had their raincoat on, and it was the 2-year-old walking in the store, and this is before I had kids, and I was like, what is that? And then I had kids. And then I went, wow. And so in order to combat some of that, I said, here's the outfit or here's the outfit. You choose, right? Here's the shoes or here's the shoes. And man, that took a lot of the battles out of the way. Go ahead. So our voice and how we say it matters. How it comes out, how we project. And some of us have to work at that, and some of us don't. Some of us have calm voices. I get louder, so I have to learn to go, hey, go ahead. An example is I work with a lot of secondaries, and sometimes when I was back home in Seattle at the high school, we'd have fights in the hallways. And I would look like I wasn't doing anything. It's really hard for people if you don't know, like they're not doing anything. If they're not physical with each other yet and they're just verbal, I can come between them and be like, hey Wayne, thanks for staying your distance. Thanks for staying your body away. You know, and I'm just kind of walking with Wayne because he's trying to get aggressive with whoever's behind me. And I'm just talking calmly and I'm saying thank you. Because guess what? I don't care if he's yelling at him. He's not what? He's not physical and engaging with them and taking them down, okay? It's a different mode if we have to go there. But anyway, sometimes it can look like, well, you're not doing anything. It's like, yes, I am. I'm using the toolbox, okay? Go ahead. Sorry, that next one, yeah. Choose your words, right? That take that deep breath, speak calmly, respond simply. Simply. They don't have the answers. Don't ask why and all these different, they don't have the answer, they don't know. Because what it was a natural response. We'll get them there, right? While you're here, if that happens, this is what we can do next time. We don't have to hash out why Ruth hit Sarah with the box. Because Ruth just did it because she wanted her toy. She doesn't know yet. She's too little, right? It's like, what we want to do is say, hey Ruth, the next time, right, this happens because we share here and we have a lot of toys here that everybody gets to use. And then we might give a couple examples of what to do. So go ahead to the next slide. So this is one of my favorite things, right? What the Word of God says is for us to do what? Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. And our number one strategies in our toolbox when we work with behavior is already right there, right? So evidence and research. Well, we know where the real stuff comes from, so go ahead. So let's talk prevention now. Environment matters. How your environment is set up. Environment matters. What do you see in this picture where you're like, holy cow, with the little one? What could be dangerous?
Fireworks.
Okay, shout it out. More stuff.
TV.
Yes, what else?
iPod.
Yes. Yes. What else?
The drugstore.
Yes. What else in the environment? Yes. TV might not be what? Mounted. Okay. There's no adult in there. There's no eyes. Yes. 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 So we can go on and on. Okay. What this picture represents is that we have to first focus on our environment. Our environment matters. How we set up our environment is critical. Go ahead. So one of the things I want you to think of when you think of your context, hello, Miss Allison, come on in. It's a classroom. What do we do when people come to us? Welcome. And so, I mean, I do that even with classes, and I teach teachers to do that. Anybody who comes in late to a class should feel what? Welcomed. Welcome. It's critical that you're welcome. Because if you don't, what happens? You don't come next time. Yeah, what? Well, I should have just, right? It's like, welcome them. It's okay. I'm glad you're here. So when we think about our environment, we've been talking about all those key pieces. It's really critical to think about how do you have your settings, your classrooms set up? Do the kids know what's expected of them when they're in your environment? And when you have this expectation, I really want you to think critically as a team, right? Especially with your directors. What are those major things we need all kids to know because they're gonna go from classroom to classroom eventually. That's our hope, right? Like as they move up, we want them to go to the next class and the next class. And so what's critical for us to set up is enough procedure, kind of what we expect so that it becomes routine. And routine helps us feel safe. Remember, safe, love, learn, okay? Routine and knowing what's expected of me helps me feel safe, okay? So some of those critical things we think of simply are, quiet voice, or our voice is what? Off, okay? So there's the rules that we want to make sure, not only do we have posted, but we teach them before we even get into our lesson. And we should do this every time they come to us every morning, quickly, okay? Because what did we say we do at home? We do what we want, and I yell at you from the second floor and I go, hey mom, right? So while we're in our classroom, this might be how we get the attention of our teacher. What does it look like to leave the classroom to go to the restroom? How do I ask, right? What does that look like and sound like? How to listen, okay? What does that look like and sound like? Because I was the kid that could listen to the teacher with my back to the teacher and talk to Ruth. And then the teacher would go, Sarah, turn around, you're not listening. And I turn around and go, oh yeah, you just said blah, 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 blah. And now I was in trouble for what? Talking back. I was like, but I was listening. What do you want? Well, she didn't, it wasn't listening she wanted my eye contact and me to be facing forward. Our instruction matters, right? Our instruction matters. Okay, go ahead. So when we think about our environments, I just want you to know that anything that you talk about as a team or your environment, especially maybe if you have kiddos where afterwards when they're here in class and they don't clean up, or maybe you have some kids that don't participate in cleaning, right? If you have activities, if you don't worry about this. But I often will tell classrooms, like, have pictures of that class clean and how you want it. And you post a picture of that, right? And you say, this is what it needs to look like. Ready? Everybody ready? We're gonna clean, we're gonna do our part, but this is what it needs to look like. Because pictures are worth 1,000 words. They encode in our brain, and our highest need kids, visuals trump words is what we say. So think about those as really good pieces to what that looks like and sounds like. For day camps, I often say, hey, your bathrooms, like kids will be in there doing whatever for camps at Bible study, Bible camp, VBS, anything like that. I'm like, take a picture of that sink and what the garbage should look like and how that should look, because you can say, needs to look like this, right? Go ahead. So keep going. So if that next one, that one where they had their hand raised, if that's what you expect for the kids to do in class with you, and that's how you get their attention versus calling out, it's good to have those visuals next to it, okay? So think about, as a team, those things that I just mentioned. Do we have those? Because if you don't, remember what I said, prevention, 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 right, is worth 1,000 before we get to what? The kiddos that are the highest need, because this is best for all kids and our kids that are highest need. Go ahead, click to the next one. So this is just a quick, what we expect we must teach. So sometimes I hear stuff like, yeah, but I tell them all the time. And I say, telling's not teaching, great? But we only have them for how long? On a Sunday. We're gonna have to start all over again. Yeah, we're gonna have to start all over again, okay? And sometimes it's repeat again, because you might have me for a short amount of time and then I go home. And I can run the couch, and I can run up the chair, and I can do, right? So we just need to make sure that every time they come to us, it's a routine, and we're all on the same page. We gotta be on the same page. Go ahead. So repetition is key to learning new skills. So if we were gonna talk about how it looks like to behave in our class, and we taught that we want you to pick your seat and stick to your seat. So pick and stick, okay? Pick your seat and stick to your seat. That's it. We're gonna teach it over and over every time they come in. What the problem usually is the adults we work with. Because I go, they can move today, right? And then Wayne kind of starts to let him move. And then they go to somebody else's room, like Kathy's, and Kathy's sticking to pick it and stick to it. And then they go, but Wayne doesn't make me, and Miss Sarah doesn't make me.
I don't care.
Yes. You're in my room now. What we do as adults matters, and once those expectations are set, we have to have them. And we have to say, I got you, because maybe you're gonna have the little Sarah next year, right? So we have to be consistent once those things are established with what we want to speak to, okay? It's so critical, right? For voices are off and hands are raised, or whatever we wanna do. So go click the first one and don't click yet. So for a child to learn something new, it needs to be repeated on average 8 times, okay? And that's a neutral time, neutral setting, not crisis and I need redirection. It means how many times I need to learn it in a neutral time. And learn is not telling me, learning is actually the hook, the lesson, how to do it right, and then give me practice, okay? 8 times, okay? How many times do you think it takes adults on average? Shout it out, what's your guess?
8.
Okay, 16, what else? Anybody else? What's it? Okay, go ahead and click. 25! Why do you think that is?
What's wrong with you guys?
Say it louder in the back.
Stuck in our way.
We are stuck. And actually we're stuck because our brain is wired to do it that way. And to undo the old learning and rewire the new learning, we have to have it that many times. So those little guys, the thing we need to think about is some of our kids to unlearn an old behavior, replace it with a new behavior. So some of the ones that don't get that repeated teaching at home, to church, or support and instruction, right? Have a little bit of a tougher time. Go ahead. So instead of that 8, they need to have it over and over and over again. And some of our kids, as you may know, I shared in the beginning, just like academic challenges or learning something, we may need to help them till they get it at some point, right? But it's about what we do to help them in the environment to be able to do what we can. Go ahead. So a couple things, and this, go ahead, I think a picture comes in or not, and you can click, is that when we have class, don't play the video, it's something that comes in if somebody wants to watch it. When we have class, we want to greet kids by name, we want to welcome them to class, and then we want to, however we host class, to do it as much of the same way as we can. So that it becomes what? Routine. Routine. So that they know what to expect and how it looks and when it's going to happen. And if you know time change, make sure it's posted in the classroom, because that helps as well with kiddos that have higher needs. And I can point and go, all right, in 2 minutes, we're going to get ready to transition. Okay? Go ahead and change. So what's important about the piece about utilizing also that engagement in your lesson that we learned earlier was, what does attention span look like? Do you remember the time of attention span?
Their age.
Yeah, around their age. So if I teach 8-year-olds, it's around that age. So remember your lessons of what does it look. The less talking we do, the more learning they actually do, okay? So the more talking we do, we kind of got to slow down and go, ooh, I got to let them turn and talk, right? And we always get worried that, no, I have their attention, I can't break it, I can't let them turn and talk. It's going to be a nightmare to get them to come back to me. And that's actually our own fears, because if we set up the environment to teach them, we're going to do a turn and talk, and you're going to turn and talk to your neighbor. We're going to teach them how that looks and what that looks like. And then when I call you back, you're going to come back. But we got to teach them what those things look like. Go ahead. So here's some more strategies for your tool belt. So the number one strategies that we've been over is you and how you respond. Remember the pause and the times that we gave? We also gave the environment, kind of how do we teach it? What does that look like and sound like? Here's something for your tool belt. I love this one. So one of the number ways to change and sustain behavior and improve behavior is to point out what they're doing right. And it's called behavior-specific praise, okay? To point out what they're doing right. So if I have a kiddo that is usually rolling around on the floor during a lesson, but today they're sitting at the lesson, what should I do? Wow, I love how that you're up here and you're sitting so quietly engaged. Awesome job. And you'll learn your students whether they want it affirmed out loud or side by side. You'll know based on the communication. But this is a strategy. This is telling them specifically. And we don't want to just say, hey, great job, Cheryl. Because Cheryl could have done 5 other things and she's like, what did I do great? Oh my gosh, right? It needs to be, great job, Cheryl. You took notes on that right away when I just gave that answer. Outstanding. Love that engagement. Cheryl kind of sits up like, yeah, right? It just gives our brain dopamine. We get so excited. It's like, yeah, we did something right, okay? But know that that is a tool and strategy. So when you have, let's say, 17 kids in a class, okay? What happens to us often is when we have that many kids in the class is our friend that was rolling around in the background, because our brains are safe, love, learn, I go safe, and I trigger to the kid that's in the back rolling around, and I go, hey, Tommy, you need to sit up and come up here. So instead of going to the 16 kids that were doing what? Sitting, ready to learn, and saying, wow, I love how the class is sitting, your eyes are forward, your voices are up, you all look like you're ready to learn. I give Tommy the opportunity to do what? Possibly join us. He might come over, or he might squirrel a little closer, right? Awesome. But at another time I can go, wow, I love how you kind of swirled over and joined us. Good job, Tommy. Because he's still quiet, right? Don't die on the hill unless it's disrupting what? The learning of others or the teaching that I'm doing, right? Because we'll get there. We're not ignoring it. It's just if you've got so much going on, we don't want to stop the whole class to get this unless it's an urgency to do so, right? Okay, go ahead. So a few more for the pocket and then we'll get into redirection. So we talked about teaching, acknowledging, is that praise, okay? And it's so important to praise, right? It's so important to lean in on that praise. Pre-correction is the one I said I was going to give you. I'm going to give you a couple examples of pre-correction. That when I walk into a classroom, this is often what I see and hear. And I want to tell you, you're going to tell me which one sounds better and which one would have less behavior from students, okay? So what we are really good at sometimes is giving what's called instruction. We'll just say, come up to the carpet and sit down, and we're going to open our books or do our work pages at whatever, okay? We give instruction. Kiddos need to hear behaviorally what you expect from them within that instruction. And that's what's called pre-correction, okay, or prompting. So here's the 2 examples, okay? I gotta work at my brain and do it wrong, so I apologize. All right, class, come up to the carpet, take a seat, open up your workbooks to page 2, and we're gonna learn about X, Y, Z, okay? That's A. Now I'm gonna give you B, okay? They're sitting at the tables. When I say go, you're gonna walk quietly and you're gonna sit up front, crisscross, your eyes are on me. You're gonna turn to page 2 and we're gonna start learning about our lesson. Go. Which one has the likelihood? A or B? A of more behaviors? A, yeah. Because as soon as I prompt, we're gonna come up to the carpet, what do half the kids do? They start moving. They start moving. So, and we haven't given the rest of the direction yet. And then what do we go into? Correction. No, wait, sit down. No, Tommy, go over here and sit down. And then it becomes, yes. So we really have got to get good at that behavior within the instruction. And for us to say, You know, I'm gonna give the directions. When I say go, you will. That's a good prompt. A prompt also is that time change for transition. We're getting ready to transition in 2 minutes. When I say go, you're gonna line up or whatever you wanna do. So be thinking about all that behavior within the instruction. If most of your kids can do whatever they're doing great, think of the kiddo that's the high flyer. What do I gotta say? What do I gotta say? Sarah's gonna blurt out like 5 times. Okay, so open up your workbooks, and if you have a question, your voice is off and your hand is raised, and wait patiently for me to call on you. Be thinking about that kid, right? What do I need to prompt to? Okay, so go ahead. So remember how we talked about prevention? Go to the next slide. Prevention is worth 1,000 corrections, okay? Because prevention is the ability to make sure that we don't have the behavior. What happens though is we all want to go, yeah, but what about, no, give me the shiny tool here. And we're always saying, the shiny tools are all the things we do to help make sure it doesn't happen, right? All kids, no matter who, no matter the highest risk, all kids. So best practice strategies are the importance of early intervening, okay? So go ahead and click. So here's the thing we talked about, our response matters. Our response matters. And there's 2 things we have with any kind of conflict. We're either gonna escalate it or we're gonna de-escalate the situation, okay? With a kid who is already, or an adult or whoever it is, escalate or de-escalate the situation. You have 2 choices at that point. And what did I say? Stay out of content. And remember Q-tip, don't take it personally, okay? So even if a kid says, I don't like you, I think you're too old or fat, or I've worked with kids forever, I've heard everything, right? Like, you know, just keeps getting better. And, you know, listening to them doesn't mean I believe that they're just escalated right now. I'm not gonna get into the content of, that's not kind, that's not right. I'm just gonna listen to them and say, it sounds like you wanna share something, I really wanna hear what you have to say, I'm here to help you, you know, keeping that pause and that quiet, because it's about listening. They just don't know how to get to what they want yet. Go ahead. So, again, just remember that what's really great again about evidence and research is all the tools they give to us, we already know what it is because it says it in the word, right? And here's another verse, that a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So when we're calm and we're gentle, you know, how can I help you? What's happened? We're more likely to have behavior that we can support versus that come in and kind of louder voice. Remember how I had to think about all the things? It's not harsh, but it can seem harsh when I'm doing my hands and I'm louder I'm Italian. I have to think, knock it down a couple notches, Sarah, right? To help. So go ahead. So when we have kids, and this is all behavior, by the way, this isn't just kids, the acting out cycle, right? Is that we can have a calm and then something triggers, okay? Something triggers us, okay? And then as we get that trigger, we move towards agitation, acceleration, peak. Peak is that highest behavior that happens, and that looks different for everybody, whatever that situation is. And then we have opportunity to de-escalate and recover. And everybody has that because at some point, some of us are able to function in whatever the setting is. We need to pay attention at those moments what that is, because they can be successful, okay? They can be successful. One of the things we have to know is what is your trigger with behavior, okay? It's really important to know your own triggers with behavior, all right? Because we have to be logical in certain situations because it can get us if we're engaging with students. I'll use my own kids for example. Because I worked with at-risk kids in a locked facility in Seattle, they could swear, they could do whatever. I have a high tolerance for that, just because that was the environment I'm at. Well, at home, when my daughter rolls her eyes, oh, no, you didn't. Like, my knees start to buckle, right? Like, oh, it's on. That's a trigger for me. And in order for me to actually have the conversation and get to the root of what's going on, I have to take a deep breath. And I have because my getting into it isn't gonna have the outcome. No matter what, we're gonna have the consequence. No matter what, we're gonna have the expectation of. It's just the journey we have, the roller coaster ride to get there, okay? So that's very important to know, that high expectations and those rules and those boundaries and those guidelines are critical. We need to have them, right? But approach matters, approach matters. So go ahead. So here's some reflection I want you to do. The next few slides will have statements on them. And I want you to think about them because these are going to be tools for your toolbox. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll get there, sorry. I'm going to get to the slide that has them, but I want to tell you why they're there. Highly effective teachers have the tools and the words. Just know that every strategy will not work the same for every kid, nor will it sometimes work for the same one. Because I could do some strategies with Karen one day and she could be responsive, and then the next day I use them and it's like she's, no, not responding. And usually that's for our kids that need more, right? Because kids that can, usually will with a couple prompts. But sometimes they need a redirect, all kids need redirection and strategies when we're teaching. It's just interesting how short our fuse is with behavior. Because when we teach math or learning the alphabet, we take some time, sounds, we reteach, we have them practice. And with behavior, it's like we want it what? Now. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. We gotta take that deep breath and go reset. And how do I approach? So a continuum is necessary. No single strategy is gonna work every single time. Some of them you may feel like you like better than others. Go ahead. The other thing is that consistency is key, not severity, okay? We all have to be very consistent with what that looks like and the use of it. It's not about severity, it's about consistency. We have to make sure that there's certainty that things, when they happen in the class, that we will be there alongside of them to help them walk through this, and that they're always welcome back to turn it around, right? Like, hey, we had a tough day. Whatever your process is for working with kids that have a tough day, they figure it out and that we welcome them back, okay? I don't need to go, Ruth, now do you know how to behave in here since you went and worked with Pastor Allison and now you're back? It's just, welcome back, Ruth. I'm so glad you're here, right? Like, just keep working through it. Go ahead. So we're gonna talk about error correction. So these are strategies that we've had escalated behavior, here we go, right? But remember, we've already been doing that, okay? It just doesn't feel like it because the power is in you and all the prevention, and now we're to the words when we're at possible escalation, but we're not at the highest peak, because the highest peak, you just need to be present. And what was the number one thing? Nonverbal, right? Not our words. 7% is our words, but what do we want to do? Why aren't you coming down, Ruth? Okay, so go to the next slide. So these are the response strategies, and I'm going to tell you about each one of them and give you that slide. Is that planned ignoring can be in our toolbox if it's little stuff, okay? Planned ignoring. So so-and-so's doing something and poking somebody, but I give a behavior-specific praise to the kiddo that's right next to them, and then they might turn it around, right? I don't have to go at Wayne every time he's tapping somebody, okay? So planned ignoring can be a strategy that you can use, because what happens is we want it to go away quickly, but sometimes it's just kids aren't settled yet, so I gotta give the direction over, let planned ignore, and then come. Now, we're gonna go through the continuum. You can use these at any point. It doesn't have to be stacked, one or the other, right? Behavior doesn't work that way. Physical proximity is if Cheryl's turned around talking to her friend, and I just start to walk over to Cheryl and go, hey Cheryl, like just even my presence, even if I don't engage with her, she might what? Turn around and stop talking. It's a possibility. Usually that happens for who? Our kids that can, right? Because you could have stood by me all day long and I would have been like, yeah, You know, like, come on and join our conversation, teacher. Direct eye contact. I can be teaching and just look back, you know, like, hey. Or if we have those posters that say what our rules are, I can give a nonverbal and just point, right? Like raise your hand, or a lot of times what happens is I call them my choo-choo trains. I'll hear shh, 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 shh. I'm like, oh, tell them, right? Right now our voices are off and we're quiet. Not shh, 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 okay? But a nonverbal can signal. Praise behavior of others, I've already shared that one with you. A redirection is a quick, right? Ruth, you turned around and talking to a friend. Can you face forward and your eyes are up here, voice is off. But I have to pick the behavior that mostly I want, right? So if it was because Ruth is turned around and talking, I want her to turn around like this way, voice is off, okay? Just don't die on the hill of all the things, we'll get there, right? But think about redirection is what the inappropriate behavior is to the appropriate behavior. So if you have any kids that have their heads down, sometimes I think of, oh my gosh, if they have their heads down and they're disengaged, we have to remember that trauma lens. If they feel safe enough in the environment that they're in with you right at this point to actually put their head down and possibly sleep, we don't know what happens and where they're at. And so, like, first think with the heart, right, before we go to that. We still can redirect and go, hey, can you go ahead and pick your head up and bring your eyes up to engage with us? We really want you present. But if they're still doing that head down, we want to ask more questions, right? If it's a pattern. Sometimes kids are exhausted because of the what? Technology and everything else, okay? So support for the procedures, or well, we have to have those in place. We've got to make sure we have those, right? And that would mean reteaching them, okay? So if our friend that was sent to, however you guys deal with behavior that could no longer be in the space because of it, we would reteach them. Whoever's that, maybe Sarah or whoever, you know, Laura is reteaching the behavior with that kiddo of, hey, while you're in class, this is how you ask for help. Or if you have that need, here's how to do it. And then they walk the kids to us and re-engage. So there's a couple different things that are there. And I had shared with you power of choice is one of my very favorite. Power of choice, right? Have those choices so that they can gain some of that power and control. Go ahead. So we're going to go to the next slide. This is the one I wanted you to see. I have this in a paper handout. I'm going to make sure that you guys get that if you want to be able to look at it and see it. My go-to is empathy. So I'm an empathy person, and that's a strategy. There's a couple strategies. Empathy is the kids are transitioning from the hallway, they're walking in and they're not settling down, and I will say, hey class, I know it can be hard to be with your friends and talking, and if they get snapped before they come to class. Get talking and socializing, go ahead and have a seat, voices are off, and we're ready to learn. In 3, 2, right, I'm giving them the time and the prompt. But I want them to know, yeah, come on, transition time, right? Or it's really important too, if there's a difficult situation, I can say, hey Sarah, I know it can be difficult to sit for long periods of time and learn this. How do we work together so that you can move, or if you're struggling, what do you need, right? Reality statements, another one that you could use in class. If you only have a little bit more time before a transition and kids are wiggly and giggly, I'll say the sooner you sit up and pay attention and your voice is up, the sooner we can line up to go to whatever the next thing is, right? It's magical with adults when we're getting ready to go to lunch. We're off task, like, ooh, you know. Same strategies though, right? Behavior is behavior, okay? So go to the next slide. These are a bunch of statements that help with diffusing a power struggle. These are those critical pieces of wanting to understand. We have to help kids if they're super escalated, like how do I understand what's going on? Because what is behavior? Like, it's communication. So it's a matter of figuring that out. It looks like you're angry, how can I help, right? Just that approach of what that looks like. Go ahead. So as we get ready to close up, again, coming back to some of the strategies, is the approach of just staying calm, tone, all those things we said. And when they come back to us, just knowing that, go ahead and click, that this journey may be something with some of the kids that come to us every Sunday or every Wednesday, be the same, right? Because remember I talked to you about why behavior? There could be other things with some of our friends. It's just a matter of setting up as much prevention as we can and how we approach and how we help kids before we get the escalation that happens with all those strategies. So one of the things I want to say is just because of the time we've had, first of all, thank you, that we went over prevention, and most of our time was on what? Prevention. Why? That is the number one. Where do our adult brains go? Yeah, but I want to know what to do with Sarah, who's in my class, who always blurts out and does X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Well, if Sarah always blurts out, the procedures of how to be in class, the pre-correction of hands are up and voices are off is going to help me, all those things. And when I do blurt out, because if I always do it, because of that cultural shift from home to class, right? We can plan to ignore the first time, and then I keep coming to Ruth and Wayne all day, thank you, because you're right in my sideline. And Wayne has his hand up, I'm gonna be like, wow, Wayne, thank you for raising your hand. Go ahead. And then I'll say, all right, friends, let's share the air. Make sure you raise your hand. I'm more likely to hear it what? Oh yeah, I need to raise my hand. Okay? The biggest thing, what happens, especially if you have kiddos that blurt out, is what happens often is it's our own adult behavior. Let's say Ruth does it, I let Ruth answer and then move on. Or Ruth answers again, or I say, hey Ruth, raise your hand, but then the next time we're in a different setting, Ruth blurts it out and I answer. So see, what I'm doing is reinforcing it versus doing the strategies I need to. It's a lot like my teachers in preschool that have the littles, and I call them the ducklings. They'll follow the teacher everywhere, right? Like they just want to follow versus staying in their seat and getting attention. And I'll say, you've got to make sure we redirect them and ask them to do the same thing over and over and teach those procedures. So if there's anything specific, because we're at 5 o'clock, if there's anything specific, I'm going to stay just for about 15 minutes if anybody has specific situations that they want to talk about or any questions. The other thing I started with was if you have any questions or need more, please put that down together and they can turn it into, turn it into Pastor Allison. And and then I will do an FAQ and fill out anything I can to help you or get you some tools. There are amazing websites with videos on how to do, if we have people, sometimes I have those engaged that really want to learn more. And you may have folks in here that are really doing a great job. Don't be afraid to model with each other and pair up and share and everything. The good news is this, is that sometimes it might take longer, but you all are the caring, connecting healers that are here with the kids. I talked a little bit about myself. My brother was a high school dropout. He dropped out of school and I shared my hardships and everything, and I do this for a living. He's now a middle school BD teacher. So so most of us figure it out. And it's because of that opener we did, remember that caring adult? Like you guys are that, right? And no matter if you're feeling like it's like, man, I gotta do this over and over and this kid just isn't getting it, just keep remembering that connection and that care can last a long time. And we might be sitting somewhere else and somebody's gonna say, wow, I went to this church and I had these really amazing people that didn't give up on me. So thank you for what you do. Thanks for having me tonight.